So we can start off with some introductions. I can go over who on the staff side is here, and then say just a few words about this planning study, so we're all on the same page, and then hand it off to Amanda to walk us through some of the questions we have. So I'm Hannah Regow, I'm a planner with Planning and Development in the Long Range Division, project manager on the Wakefield Small Area Study. A few other colleagues here from Long Range Planning, Christopher Golden, Jason Harden, and Carmen Kwan. I don't know why I get your name wrong sometimes. No, it's literally right there. So we're starting at the very beginning stages of the Wakefield Small Area Study, which is the city will conduct small area planning studies that focus just on a region or area of the city, and those typically have a few products. Obviously, there's the public process that engages the community, and that lends is a really big piece of it. Obviously, the end products are typically policy guidance for development, so land use, transportation, urban design, parks. It can sort of depend on the study, and then also often the identification of projects, of capital projects that might be needed. I see we just lost Lemuel, maybe. There he is again. Great. We're at the beginning stages doing some of our fact finding, trying to understand issues and opportunities, but also speak to organizations and agencies that work and get their perspective. So maybe I pause for a second, see if y'all have any questions. We can obviously answer those at any time. Otherwise, I can hand it off to Amanda.
Okay. It would be helpful for me to just kind of go around, particularly the guests on the call, and just tell me your name and what department you're with and what your role is. I'll kick it off for us. My name's Amanda Morell. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer with Stantec, the lead consulting firm for this planning effort. And I'll pass it off to Michael.
Thank you. I am the only Michael. I'm Michael Ballen, Raleigh Police Department. I work out of the Chief's office. My police title is Community Policing Coordinator / Liaison. My city title, as we all know, we went through classification, is Public Safety Analyst. Some of the things that I do, one valuable thing for our city police department is help bridging the gap between internal and external stakeholders and building stronger and better relationships, but also creating a conduit for feedback. Because as we know, sometimes things can be miscommunicated or misunderstood. I also work a lot with external groups in helping building strategies and performance measures, but also looking at how they can best become efficient in what they do when they want to partner with a local government or the police department. Thank you.
Awesome. So nice to meet you. Mr. Hubbard?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Lemuel Hubbard, and I work with the Raleigh Fire Department. I'm the primary fire and life safety educator and education coordinator, responsible for providing the city with timely fire and life safety educational messages, and also working together to reduce our number 1 and 2 cause of fire, which is unattended cooking and improperly discarded smoking materials such as cigarettes. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining today. And did our third guest join us, Mr. Johnson? Is that who the guest line is?
He will be on soon. We have someone who is who needed their car broke down. We're trying to help him out, so we got a deputy who's down, so he'll be on shortly.
Always on the job. I
Oh,
gotcha. No,
great fire department. Wow.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you both for joining us right now. Hopefully, Mr. Johnson will jump on when he can, but I'm actually going to turn my video off and I'm going to start screen sharing. And that is a hope that my audio stays clear for you all. So I'm going to turn that off and start sharing. We are using a digital workspace called Mural during these focus group meetings. And that's what I'm going to be sharing on the screen. This is a place where we're going to be notating the information that you share with us today so that we can ultimately compile it and let it inform the recommendations of this small area study. So I'll zoom out to give you a little bit of a sense of the space and all the information we're collecting. So we've got, project area information and mapping. We've got our project timeline, which as you can see is pretty short. So we will have some recommendations coming back to the city just in the span of a couple of months. And so that's why it's so important for us to talk to folks like you early on in the process so we can really, glean relevant information from your local knowledge and let that inform the planning that's going to happen over the coming weeks. So we have spoken to some folks with your local school system. We're going to be talking to some civic groups and other folks within the city as well related to parks and open space and all of that great stuff. But today with you all, we really wanted to focus on public safety, fire, police, EMS. You guys are, the frontline first responders in this community. And so I think it's so important to listen to your perspective on what's happening in and around Wakefield. I've set up a little bit of sort of a framework for our conversation. This is by no means, does this limit us in any way to what we can talk about? Really, we are here to listen and hopefully learn from you all the information that we'll need moving forward. But I did kind of frame it out with some headings that might spark a conversation. So some of the things that I like to start asking is, are there any sort of perception versus reality issues happening in and around Wakefield? We've got a map up here on the right that kind of shows you the extent of the study area. Falls of Neuse Road and Capitol Boulevard being the two major corridors, Wakefield Pines and the access to the school campuses certainly being another kind of major corridor that frankly we heard a little bit about yesterday from the high school principal and about some of the backups that are happening on that roadway. We've got some maps on here that we can reference as y'all share that are related to crash information, fatalities, pedestrian bicycle crashes. So, as you are, telling me some of your local knowledge and information, we can reference back to this or the Google map to sort of make notations. But just to kick the conversation off, would you say there's any sort of perception versus reality challenges you all face in the Wakefield area? So no. Everybody thinks it's a beautiful day in Wakefield, and it is a beautiful day in Wakefield, huh?
I mean, this is Lieutenant Hubbard. I mean, I've worked out there a couple times, and one of the, I mean, I guess on the surface, it's always appeared like a very quiet, very new neighborhood, a lot of new construction, and so I can imagine that we we have some of the similar issues that we have in different areas. Like I worked in the Briar Creek community for 5 or 6 years, and that's kind of a similar community in my opinion. And one of our biggest issues was like suicides was a big issue we had in the community, and then just kind of drugs. I mean, those were not necessarily um, not necessarily the bad drug, not like big bad drug dealers, but it was just it just I mean there's just every community has issues. So
Right. Okay. Michael?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lemuel. That actually was a segue for me because, yeah, I think the perception is that uh, that though you have a very what I would say middle to upper class community, and things seem to be when it comes to traffic not as bad. Reality is that traffic is very heavy, especially foot traffic. You know, with the high school and vehicle traffic, because you have a lot of young people that are out and about after school, especially come summertime. They move around very, very well, going from McDonald's over to, uh, and actually there's a pizza place that's right there on, right in the, in that parking lot where the food line is, that the kids like to hang out as well. You know, so it's a heavy foot traffic, and I see the dynamic of more traffic, um, because when I moved here, I never forget when I moved here, um, that stretch of Falls of Neuse was still closed, and I moved here 12 years ago.
Mm.
And I never forget, we used to walk over, my wife and I, when we would just couldn't imagine traffic driving down this way. And now it's kind of like a raceway based on what time you're there. And also, our perception is that, you know, it's a very uh, low, there's very low incidence when it comes to youth dealing with substance abuse. And what I know and what we've learned is, you know, youth, when it comes to access, they have greater access because of, you know, actually because of where they are. It's just that they don't have to bring it to school, and they don't and get caught versus it just being accessible to where they live, you know, in their homes. So
Mm.
drugs or alcohol, it's still an issue, a problem. I don't think I know then what kind of ties into what Lemuel says about suicide, because there's still kids that are dealing with things that we just probably, you know, are touching the tip of the iceberg, and it's a problem.
Mm. I gotcha. So mental health perhaps and some of the drug issues tying together. So you mentioned the schools, and that was certainly something I wanted to just hear y'all's perspective on. You know, are there resource officers in each of these schools, I would assume?
In the high school, we have a resource officer at the high school, and then the middle school, the sheriff's department, they are responsible for the middle school. So there are law enforcement officials at both of those schools. In elementary, and I'm assuming that elementary wise, that, you know, the sheriff's department is someone kind of floats back and forth between that and the middle school. But definitely resource officer at the high school and resource officer at the middle school.
Okay. And you mentioned something else I wanted to ask you about. So we heard yesterday that the hangouts, right, are McDonald's and Sergio's, the pizza place I think you alluded to. So, you know, in thinking about, I know some communities, resource officers end up kind of migrating post from the school to some of these after school areas to, you know, keep the kids sort of in check. Does that happen in Wakefield, or are there other officers that are just kind of aware that that's where kids are hanging out, and so they kind of make their presence known a little bit?
I know some of that happens, so forgive me because I can't answer that question 100% because I know the
Mhm.
district, North District, they have officers that are floating, and then they have some officers, what they do is after a certain time, they sit in the parking lot over there doing paperwork so that way it
Mm.
gives high visibility, and, you know, hoping that that's a deterrent as well. But so I can't just say 100% that when the school is done, that school resource officer is then floating over there because he knows that that's where the kids are going to hang out. I cannot, but I do know that units are always in that area around that time to try to cut down on heavy foot and vehicle traffic, but also to make sure that things are okay.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. You know, from a physical presence, you know, Lieutenant Hubbard, I see, you know, your fire station 25 sits within the study area. I did not notice any police substation or anything within this boundary. Is that accurate? Is this served by the northeast facility?
Yeah, the Northeast. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lieutenant.
Yeah, well, that would be correct. I mean, one thing I will say, we recently added an engine company and a ladder company at Station 25. So typically it was a one company station for a long time. Now we have two companies that serve the Wakefield area. So which is great because and I mean it's one of our 25 is one of our furthest districts out. So it's like whenever there's an incident in that particular side of the city, there's always been a kind of a time delay for a lot of our trucks to get to incidents. So, but as of now, I mean, I would assume that the police department has their own substation, and EMS does in that area.
Well, our district is there on Northeast. It's there on Millbrook Road.
Okay.
We don't have anything any closer. And I don't know if there's ever been a conversation about having a mini station or a substation, or just a place for RPD to have access and increase times if they needed to. Usually, we do try to look at certain studies based on some of the information that comes in that will garner the conversation about, do we need to have space in that area for officers to respond? But I haven't heard of anything, and forgive me, because I know that the district commander, if I would have known that you'd ask that question, I'd have made sure he'd have been on here to actually be able to give you a better answer than what I'm giving you.
Oh, well, you can always circle back with us. This is not the
Okay.
be all end all conversation. So some of these things that, you can kind of tap the right person to find out. We,
Good.
encourage you to do that, and that would help us out. Yeah, because I was curious about that, if there were future plans perhaps for a physical presence on the police side of things that we could be thinking forward as we're planning some of these areas. And so that'd be great to know. Lieutenant Hubbard, you mentioned, response times and the fact that this is kind of one of the furthest districts. That was one sort of point I had both for fire and police and EMS. Ultimately, are there challenges related to response time, because of the infrastructure in this area? I know you've got some busy, corridors you're dealing with here. You've got some school backup that's happening during at least twice a day, 5 days a week that, would impact response time. I'm just curious, anecdotally, I know y'all can probably give me the numbers, right, of how long it's taking you to get to a scene, but anecdotally, what would you share about your response time?
Well, I would say for the most part, our response time is still roughly 4 minutes. I mean, if from the station, within the district, that's how we work pretty much all over the city. It could be short, a minute or less or two, depending on the time of the day. So, traffic would play a factor, but it's a matter of our drivers understanding how to manage traffic during those time frames. So if we know we have a terrible traffic, sometimes, I mean, it's depending on the nature of the emergency. I mean, we may find alternative routes to get to places quicker, or knowing areas that have less traffic that we can go through. But for the most part, the residents are pretty good at allowing us to have the right of way to get to where we need to go. So I mean, it's a matter of making sure our drivers are prepared and trained to handle the traffic situation. So that really wouldn't be an issue. But I mean, the only issue that we do have is if one engine company is on one call and then there's another call, that would prolong the time frames of a call. But the mere fact we have two apparatus right now coming out of Station 25, that gives us a huge bonus in terms of being able to negate our response times. So,
Okay, I gotcha. And Michael, would you say similar to y'all? I mean, y'all got a little bit further to go from base for sure up here.
We do, but the best, and I can answer it this way because I'll definitely have the captain to give me more insight on that. But I answer this way because we're a service that we're always out and officers are always working, and our response times can vary. You know, because of an officer who is assigned to that area is working, and he gets a call, then he can be there within seconds to minutes, versus him coming out of the station. So we're not sitting somewhere in a station per se like our brothers at the fire department who are responding to alarm call. We're out policing or giving attention to the area because that's part of police assignment. And so and if I'm not mistaken, because we have a very strong community policing philosophy, we have community police officers who spend time in a lot of these areas. If it's not in bike riding, or if it's or just doing some kind of engagement based on kind of specialized group. Because what helps us, unlike, like I said, Lemuel, as he said, we do have that school resource officer who's there at the school, that if it really needs attention, we can contact him and say, hey, we need you to respond here. We have other units en route.
Gotcha.
But I want to make sure I come back to that because some of these things I want to get the captain to give me some more in-depth information that'll help us out on this document.
Great. And I guess we'll follow up with the EMS, Hannah, to kind of get a sense on response time for them. You know, I look at this area, and much like y'all do, I'm sure. And while there are some, you know, general connections, particularly in the commercial areas, you know, the residential areas, you know, do have more sort of dead end streets and things like that that are a little bit of a challenge, I know, for first responders. So it gives me a good oversight there. Related to transit, and this is something I actually noticed on our mural, and I'm not sure if one of my staff that lives locally noted this, or Hannah, if somebody from your team noticed this, but there were some safety issues in and around some transit locations, maybe near the food line location. Is that something that this group could give me a better sense of? Are y'all having some issues at any of the bus stops?
I would have to do some more research on that from my
Okay.
end.
All right, y'all can get back to us on that. That's no problem. And I'll try to dig deeper into the data I can get from the mural on who actually put that in.
How many transit stops do we have in that area, if you don't mind me asking?
Let me go and see if we've got it located in one of the maps up here, Hannah. We've got the route, and we've got a loop here. And Hannah, you can point them out. There was one right off of, and I can't speak the name. Can you or Carmen help me out?
There really aren't that many. There's one or two places in the shopping centers at the corner of Capitol and Falls of Neuse. And there is, right now, there is not an existing transit route that goes along Falls of Neuse. It is mostly along Capitol Boulevard, and the transit service out there is somewhat infrequent and few and far between. Internally to the study area, there's probably, I would say, no more than 5, but there are planned transit stops along Falls of Neuse where they intend on adding service at some point in the future.
And thank you, Carmen, because I don't know if that is a telltale sign of the accessibility of transportation in the area, because you know you have a lot of young people in the high school as well as their parents who are vehicle owners, and they have a way to to get around. Because honestly, it's funny because I used to live over there. When I first moved there, I lived there 12 years, And so a lot of information I'm giving is from experience of living in that community, in that neighborhood. And that's why I asked the question about transit, because I never saw a lot of stops. But even though, there were a couple of times where the bus tends to, I would say, slow the traffic. And you would have people trying to get the bus or the transit to speed up and not hinder their flow as they're moving. So don't know what the plans are when you look at, what a place of transit be, but I know that I don't know if it's such a big need for people to move from this side to wherever they may need to go, because I find that there's a lot of accessibility of vehicles in the area and they are utilized heavily. They're people drive in that area, people drive everywhere. If not, it's such a great convenient area because you kind of can, if you live in a home or an apartment that's close to that Wakefield area, you got your grocery store, your fast food, you have, the tavern that's over there. You got everything in that, small congested spot, and you don't really have to go anywhere unless you want to.
Yeah, that's a really good point, which makes me think of the question, it's convenient, but is it walkable? Is it a pleasure to leave your apartment or your house and walk to the tavern or some of those places? Or, are some of the safety concerns, I guess, with this group in particular come to mind? We've got some notated crashes that are happening both with cyclists and pedestrians. We'll know more in the coming weeks, analysis wise, sort of what that looks like and, from an overall standpoint. But, this certainly kind of puts a red flag in my mind of there may be some improvements we need related to bike ped safety. People are obviously trying to get to these areas, but there's some unfortunate things happening while that's going on. So,
and Amanda, you really hit the nail on the head from what you see from the 40,000-foot view. Is you have a lot of people that are biking and walking, and people want to be able to move in a safe manner. And I believe that's some of the problem with the traffic, the high volume and traffic of people using Falls of Neuse, not just coming home, but as a cut through to Wake Forest to get to Capitol Boulevard to go to Johnston County or Franklin County, not Johnston, but Franklin County. See, so I think through that area, you get a lot this vehicle traffic that's mixed and people are moving, especially on a beautiful day like this. You're going to have a lot of people out walking, going from one neighborhood over to that place. But is it convenient? Is it safe to move? And if it's not, then what do we do? Because I know maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they just put a light at an intersection out there because they realized that the traffic is so heavy, people can't get off of these side streets to get onto Falls of Neuse if they're trying to cross to either go south, east, or west. And so they put a light up there with the kind of, I would say, a weird configuration because when I first moved here, it was no light, but it was hectic trying to get out. So safety and how do we, or what do you look at to create a more walker-friendly, bicycle-friendly atmosphere or roadway or area, so that way there's not a clash with vehicle traffic, if that makes any sense.
perfect sense. Yes. And I think that's from day one when we've just been brainstorming about this, that's kind of the number one goal of this project is, how can we make what's out there today more walkable, more bikeable, and just safer for this community and for you all who are, out there trying to protect it and service it. So that is really good feedback, especially from somebody who lived there, frankly. That's good firsthand knowledge. So let's see, we've talked a little bit about crashes related to bike and ped. Vehicular wise, is this sort of a hot area where y'all are responding to a lot of vehicle crashes at intersections and things like that? I'll go back up to my crash map here. So just a few, we've got a few fatalities notated along Falls of Neuse. Certainly a couple serious injury crashes. So is this Lieutenant Hubbard somewhere where y'all are getting called out to Falls of Neuse on a pretty regular basis for crashes? Did we lose Lieutenant Hubbard? Oh, there you are.
I'm here. I'm here. I had a little delay there. So I would say that, wrecks are big thing. So we do go to a lot of wrecks, and typically it's steady pretty much all over the city when we come to wrecks. So so it's not a that's really not more of one area have more wrecks than other ones. It's really kind of average on amount of wrecks we go to. We typically only go to the wrecks where someone's been hurt. So like your regular fender bender, we're not going to respond to those.
Right.
But if someone is calling and say they're hurt, those are the ones we're sending our trucks out to our pin-ins. So, but I mean, I would have to do a little bit more research to see which areas in that community are like high wreck areas. So, I can write down and do some more research for you on that.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah. We like to always sort of compare what the data is telling us to what you all tell us anecdotally so that, we get a little bit of a ground truthing, if you will, on what the data is telling us. So yeah, that would be a great follow-up to hear from you, Lieutenant. Okay. One thing that came to mind, and I guess probably because I'm a landscape architect, this is an area that's, got some pretty heavily planted areas with some pretty large shrubs and things like that sort of immediately make me think of, places to hide, right, for folks. But, is the crime in this area just really low? Do y'all deal with any of the sort of crime prevention through environmental design concerns that we as, shapers of the land and the urban form can help y'all combat on some of these corridors that might be, have some of this shrubbery and things like that?
What I do know, and I would love to definitely get more information, and I will from the captain, but what I do know is some of the issue is trespassing and, being in the pool after hours, because they have a complex over there, apartment complex that has gone through, I think, a couple of names, and they're supposed to be some kind of luxury apartments, but the young people, because there's so many of them over there, high schoolers and middle schoolers, they just walk around and hang out, and sometimes they are in areas where they are not supposed to be hanging out. And if it's a business owner or an adult or a resident who's saying, "Hey, you can't be here," or they're telling them that they're not supposed to be on this property, then you may get a call, or the kids just, they just move on. But I need to get more, because I know there's a shopping center over there. Don't know if there's a lot when it comes to, a low-level larceny or misdemeanor where people are walking in and just taking stuff, as well as the convenience store, the one stop that's there. But trespassing and just being in places after hours when they're closed, like the pool, have posed a difficult issue.
I gotcha. Yeah, if you can let us know, crime wise, within this boundary, if there are other things y'all are dealing with, that'd be great information for us to have. Are there any, I assume with all the schools, certainly they're having events, sporting events and things like that. Are there other events that y'all are being called out, whether it's just somebody setting up something in one of these large parking areas that y'all are having to, provide protection for, or is it really just the school systems and their events with the resource officers?
Well, I know that last year sometime there was one event at there was a home in Wakefield where they were, because of the pandemic, they were having a parade, one of those vehicle parades, and they called for our assistance to make sure that they can get through safely. And if there's any other type of community event that people are holding and they request police just to come and be a part, then we're there. And those don't happen all the time, because I believe in the area, the perception is that the relationship between the community and the police are pretty intact. And there's not a lot of engagement that needs to happen to create, I believe, that trust. But that's one of those things I think that when I speak with the captain about, and I ask, what you asked, he may be able to give more insight on, the question that you asked about events, because I know when there are sporting events like high school sports, the school resource officer usually ask or get volunteers from the department or from whoever they're working with to come over and just kind of, now they're paid volunteers, though they're volunteers. Let me make sure I clarify that. So, because if they, and what I mean by that, if these are officers, so if there's a football game and they need about 5 or 6 officers for, crowd control as well as traffic, then, he puts out a request, and they go through our system that we have for off-duty and officers volunteer, and they come out and they get paid, I believe, whatever the school has put forth for that event to work, So those things do happen. You do have sometimes officers that are working in that area based on events, because, we have football and which is, I think, the biggest draw outside of the basketball games. But football, when it's going on over in the Wakefield area, you get a lot of people, and especially if it's a crosstown rivalry with Wake Forest, then you got to have a lot of hands on deck to make sure you cut down on what the potential of having an issue or a problem.
Michael, is there sort of coordination between your department and the town of Wake Forest, police department on some of these events? Do y'all both work them?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
What does happen, let's say, for instance, if Wakefield and Wake Forest does work, if they're going to play and they're playing at Wakefield, then most likely the school resource officer and maybe one other officer from Wake Forest may come over with the team, and they're just there with the team, because what you recognize and what by law that we have to stand to is that now you crossed over to another jurisdiction and you lose your powers of arrest unless there's some kind of mutual aid agreement that was signed and agreed to that you can help or assist. But other than that, when you cross over into another city, then your jurisdiction does not apply to whatever the subject matter may be if you're enforcing, though you can assist in helping keeping people safe. You've got to just make sure that you be very careful about how you do that, because the law is not as, I would say, as understanding if you're doing something outside of your span of control in the terms of jurisdiction.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. Do y'all have any issues with some of the public greenways that are they really kind of touch this area? Any crime, any sort of issues in this immediate area that y'all are called out for on a regular basis?
Not that I'm aware of, and forgive me, but that's something too I'd like to ask. But we do know that the Greenway is big, and we're always looking to try to see what's a better way to keep the people safe on the Greenway. If it's through some of the Greenway volunteers, I believe that we coordinate with through our city. So I think the city has Greenway volunteers, and so they are really extra eyes and ears. But we look to try to make sure that we cover as much as the Greenway as possible, even if it means there's some kind of special assignment and guys are are just going there and making themselves visible to the public that are utilizing the Greenway.
I gotcha.
And I don't know, and maybe I may be just, this is wishful thinking, but I thought there were talks through our city government, through our city manager's office, of possibly developing some kind of Greenway, not, well, allocating funds so that we can have Greenway officers on the, on the Greenway, because we do know that that was a large project for the city. And not only was it a large project, the Greenway touches so many other city, not city departments, but other cities, other towns. And so it's very big. And sometimes, you can get lost on it, especially if someone calls and you have an incident and you're trying to figure out how you need to get there to either effective arrest or stop something that's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. That would be a great thing if that was happening. That'd be wonderful. Okay. The last thing I'm interested in, and I think, Michael, you are just the guy to ask this, is about outreach. That's certainly something we're doing through this project. And, we talked to the school system, of course, about some of the tools that they're using in this area to reach the community. It sounds like they focus on sort of the mass text messaging serve, but they also mentioned, Facebook page. That Nextdoor was pretty big in this area. We also talked about the fact that we will need Spanish translation on all of the surveys and things like that. I think he had, Hannah, 13% Hispanic population, within his 2,000 kids. So talk to me a little bit about maybe just some lessons learned or advice you might have for us and this process about ways that you're reaching maybe this particular community, anything we could piggyback on or send out information with, and vice versa.
Yeah, one is knowing and understanding, your general area and the population that you're dealing with, because even when you talk outreach, and believe me when I say it, outreach can have a positive or negative connotation based on who you talk to and based on what they believe they need or what they don't need. And sometimes when you say outreach in certain communities or areas, they look at you, kind of sideways, like, outreach, what kind of outreach do we need? And it could be, just trying to bridge the gap and have great conversation and talk to people to help build a stronger relationship. So communication is free flowing, and and you're a conduit, or you created that conduit. So what I know and I recognize is that sports in that area is very big, very big. And so connecting to some of those sport teams and some of those other groups that they have in that area is very, is a good way to connect and to build, I think, a strategic front because of what you're trying to do when you talk about connecting. Also the HOA, as well as the school, and forgive me because it's been all my people are out of high school for a long time, so I'm forgetting terms. But the school, not a school, what do you call them? The parents that get involved with
PTAs. Yeah.
Thank you very much. PTA is a big thing. Trust me, PTA is a big thing in schools like this. And so connecting with the PTAs, you'll find that you'll be able to really get a lot of things moving, because PTAs are groups of people who have, I would say, stakes in why they're there with their children being in school. And a lot of times those PTA members, they're willing and ready as a force to be mobilized and to do almost anything. So if you were looking to try to get a message out, connecting with that PTA would be very, very valuable, because then they would then take your message and begin to push it and move it and maneuver it in a way better than you can, because they know all the role players. They know the people that you need to talk to. So that's always a plus when you deal with an area like this, those PTAs, those small HOA groups, because they are very serious about keeping their way of life. And not that it's a bad thing, but sometimes they could be a little anal retentive on some of the things they want to have done and to keep done. So hopefully just those few things there is enough to help with developing strategy on how you want to engage that community.
Perfect. Lieutenant Hubbard, are y'all doing community outreach in a similar way or with Fire District 25?
I mean, since COVID started, a lot of our outreach is kind of stalled. So we're kind of at a at a pause right now, as a lot of people are. But one of our, I mean, as like since I work downtown, I look at the city top down, and a lot of our energies are really geared toward communities that have high fire risk. And Wakefield right now isn't one of our communities with high fire risk, but it is a community that have a lot of homes that are 10 years or older, and there will be a need for smoke alarm installs in a lot of the homes that are 10 years or older. So we will probably be looking to have over the upcoming years an aggressive smoke alarm canvassing installation program within the Wakefield community. So that will be the one of the main outreaches points that we will have. And then anytime we have like a fire within the community, we try to go out and engage those communities after the fire. Just letting citizens know, hey, this was an incident. This was probably the cause, and we want to find ways that we can continue to educate. And Michael, that is a great idea of connecting with your PTAs. I'm gonna have to steal that strategy as well when we get to it again.
It is free, my friend. It is free. Trust me. It is, and it's because I lived in the area, and my wife was involved. And when she was involved, I was involved too, right? Because it's not that she didn't sign both of us up, and so because she signed up, so guess what? I was there too, and I realized that I was looking at a well-oiled machine, and honestly, perception is all schools are built the same. Reality is they're not, and you find that, and I like what you said, Lemuel, about looking at the city, from the top down, but also recognizing priority, because here the perception is that you don't have to do a lot of trust building, to help build relationship, because it's there already, because people automatically trust the police because of the area and what it stands for and the people that live there, versus going across town to another zip code where you're spending time in outreach efforts to build relationships so you can create an atmosphere of trust, so that way you have legitimacy in what you do, versus in the Wakefield area where it's kind of inherited, if I may say that in a sense. It's just something that's there.
I get what you're saying, because I mean, it's for the fire department pretty much citywide. The respect is just there, and everyone when they see us come, a lot of the issues that the police department are having, we aren't dealing with, and so we just as a sister partner in this, we just try to like I try to lift you guys up as much as I can as we're out into the community, because it's all about cultures, and different cultures affect how you view things. And I can see how police departments viewed a lot better in Wakefield than they are, in Southeast Raleigh. So it's
and I say that, and you say that very well, Lemuel, but then I pivot to some reality based on the pandemic and based on some of the national issues that's been going on between the community and police and some of these incidents, because what we have seen and what we have found is that this is the people who are lending their voices to causes. They're just not coming from communities that we think that could be over-policed or over-represented. There are people coming from the Wakefield areas and saying that, wait a minute, we're crying foul, and we're saying that there are things that have to be done now, and we're saying that we want to see some accountability. See, so it's kind of switched and moved slightly. And what I believe is that people, because of the pandemic, had to take a deep breath, and now they're starting to see and view their city, their world, and they're taking in all these things, and they're trying to figure out, hey, why is this happening? Why did that go on? How can I do? So I just find that there's a lot that's happening, and even in the Wakefield area, though that's why I say the perception, because reality says now that there are people that up there that have a question mark about, does police departments, are they really legitimate in some of the things they do, and do we need to look at how we reform them for the 21st century? So that's a conversation that everybody is having across the country, about who we are and what we do, and how we can change some of the scenes that we've seen and become a better country and move us forward into the 21st century. Again, I'll say that's been redundant, so forgive me. But yeah, so.
That's great. You both make great points, and I know we're sort of at the end of our time, but I did want to thank y'all I know y'all are busy guys, and we just appreciate all you're doing for the city and all you do to protect people on a daily basis. So just thank you for your service, and thank you for providing your input to this process. And we will certainly take all the information you gave us, and hopefully all the follow-up information that you send Hannah's way, and we'll incorporate that into the recommendations. So continue to engage in the process as Hannah reaches out, and we'll certainly be sending along things for y'all to review throughout the process. But thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. And one last thing, if you could,
Yeah.
if you have minutes for the meeting, if you could share those with us, that would be awesome.
That'd be great. It really would.
Yeah, and Hannah can certainly share the recording, right, for your folks and departments, and that way, if they've got any other little tidbits of knowledge they want to add, they can certainly do that. And we'll send out a summary, really, of not just your meeting, but all the other meetings with the other folks, like the HOAs you mentioned. Michael will be talking to them. That way, if they say something, frankly, it might, surprise you or make you aware of something that you might not have known. Otherwise. That's what's great about these meetings and talking to such a broad range of folks. So
yeah,
we'll certainly get that to you.
Because even what you find before the city council decided to dissolve the CACs, you didn't have a lot of people participating in CACs in these communities, because what was strong was these neighborhood HOAs that people were very connected to, and they were making sure that they were keeping those things in place. And so the CACs they saw as just, oh yeah, I go, but it's not really in my best interest, because what's my interest is my community, my neighborhood, and my HOA. So I'm gonna make sure that I stay true to them. That's why I believe, as the city council is trying to figure out a great way for engagement, a great way for public participation, that they don't have, I would say, they have some pushback, but from some of these areas like Wakefield, there's not a lot, because they feel good about what they do, because they can continue, because the city council is not telling them that they can't meet, telling them that they're dissolved. HOA is still, my neighborhood is still here, and we're still doing what we do. So
that's a great point. Such a great point. Well, again, thank you guys, and have a great rest of your day. Hannah, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thanks again for your time.